Welcome friends to another r/maliciouscompliance video. Did you know that statistically 100% of polite people will hit the like and subscribe buttons down below? It's a true fact. That said, our first story of the day is by quite the opposite, yes. Karen, the building manager, probably regrets her wording. I live in a housing cooperative. I have no idea if there's something equivalent in other countries, but I live in Norway. It's essentially where you own your own apartment, but the cooperative owns the buildings and the land. If you're going to make changes to the building, you'll have to apply for a permit. Otherwise, it's generally do as you please, as long as you don't bother your neighbors. Anyways, I put up a small greenhouse on my private patio, as many others had done, but not this exact type. This was an aluminum construction, not a frame with a loose plastic cover kind. The building manager, who is best described as a triple Karen, threw a fit. She actually watched me spend 3 days assembling the greenhouse, then the next day she called me and threw a fit. Not because I put up a greenhouse, but because I had used screws to fasten it to the patio for stability. Apparently I wasn't allowed to use screws on the floorboards, as this was considered changes to the building in her mind. And I had destroyed the floorboards. Never mind, the whole patio was built with, wait for it, screws through the floorboards. Screws in the wall were okay, she told me, in response to me asking why she'd put up shelves on her patio herself, but not the floorboards. Apparently the difference was monumental and everyone should just know this. Intuitively, nowhere, literally nowhere, does it say fastening things to the floorboards or putting screws in the floorboards is not allowed. Not in the house rules, my contract, or in the National Housing Cooperative's law. But she was furious I had done this. I took a deep breath, and as I'm quite creative, I immediately thought of a workaround. I'll just put it on wheels then. I made a big number of saying that fastening was essential because otherwise the greenhouse would not be stable enough to withstand wind. She said she understood this, but I had now ruined the co-op's property, and this was a really serious matter. She told me to send an application for a permit to see if she could find a way to get approval from the board. But she couldn't guarantee I could keep it, she said, with the fakest of sympathies. So I sent an application with photos saying what I had done and that I didn't think I had to apply to do it, as I never considered putting in a prefabricated greenhouse being seen as changes to the building. My application was rejected as I anticipated, but she worded the rejection exactly as I hoped she would. I was not allowed to put in a fastened greenhouse, and she probably thought she'd been clever when she included that I was not allowed to put the greenhouse on my front lawn either. I had worked the "it needs to be fastened to be stable" angle hard because I hoped she, as the Karen is, would fall for that reverse psychology. So I proceeded to put the greenhouse on wheels. I made a frame from 2x4s and put 8 small furniture wheels under the frame. I then lifted and screwed the greenhouse onto the frame. I put some boards on the sides just above the ground to stop the draft. Boom, mobile greenhouse. I can slide it all over the patio. I put some hooks in the walls and used transport straps to secure the whole thing to the wall for stability. The walls were okay to put screws in, remember? So in effect, my greenhouse is now in the exact same location, 4 inches taller, and with ugly blue ribbons tying it to the wall. And the patio now has 22 open screw holes, ready to be filled with rainwater in the fall. But oh well, as she's repeatedly told me, it's not my patio. Then I sent an orientation email to the building manager with photos and videos of the sliding greenhouse, with the rest of the board members on copy, where I explained in detail what I had done and how every step was in compliance with this rejection email I had received, which I of course included. I said the greenhouse was now to be considered a piece of mobile patio furniture, just like my sofa and chairs were, and that I now considered the subject to be a closed matter. I've not heard a single word from any of them. It's been over a week. I think I got her. I can't imagine she'll find a loophole that lets her legally dictate what patio furniture is allowed and not in the co-op, since the patios are stated to be for every apartment owner's private usage. So when Christmas comes, I'm planning to decorate the greenhouse with lights. Make it pretty, because every time Karen steps out of her front door, she has to face my patio where she's looking straight at my greenhouse. The least I can do is make it pretty for her, right? If you had a Karen next door trying to dictate what you can and can't do on your front patio, would you make this thing as compliant but also as ugly as possible just to spite her? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by SureFineWhatever67. Thank you for your input, Karen. Or how I did exactly what the HR lady told me to. I, 35-year-old female, live in a big city in Western Europe. After graduating college, I was hired as an office assistant in a big company. Let's call it Happy Place. I did my last internship as a student there, and it went so well that I got hired just a few weeks after getting my master's degree. Over the next 10 years, I worked my way up from an assistant to office manager to head of one of the biggest departments. I wasn't paid a lot of money, but it was above average and the benefits were great. But the main reason I stayed for so long was the people who worked there. Over the years, I've made quite a few friends there, and by the year 2020, I was one of the most experienced people working in Happy Place. My colleagues often came to me for advice about how to do this or that, and I also had a great relationship with the big bosses. And the cherry on top was that I had the best boss someone can hope for. Let's call her Maggie. Maggie was 10 years older than me, and she was Wonder Woman. She's nice, professional, cool, helpful, and has a heart of gold. I've worked with her during my whole time at Happy Place, and the last 4 years, she was my direct supervisor. I loved her. Then in 2020, a few things happened almost at the same time, and over the course of 6 months, Happy Place turned into Sad Place. First, the company hired a new HR lady, Karen. She was the worst. She treated everyone below her level of responsibilities, which is pretty much 99% of the staff, treated them as if they were lesser people, talked down to everyone, and constantly made changes in the HR policies. She implemented quite a few new rules, which led to us losing some of the benefits that we liked, like free lunches, paid time off to go to a doctor's office during office hours, etc. But the CEO of the company trusted her for some reason, and soon he stopped taking meetings with the staff, making Karen the only person who could make decisions regarding the staff, which meant that no one could actually complain about her, and we slowly started feeling helpless. Second, Maggie was promoted to a different field, the one she actually wanted to work in, so I can't be mad at her for leaving, and she got replaced by Susan as my new supervisor. Susan was cool, but she was my age and with less experience, which did not make much sense. So even though on paper she was the one in charge, I was the one constantly explaining to her how things worked and what needed to be done, while she took the credit. And lastly, COVID. Our line of work was highly impacted by the pandemic, so the whole year 2020, I was working under an enormous amount of stress. Taking almost no vacation time, doing my job and some of Susan's job, as at some point she went on medical leave, and some of my coworkers' jobs, as some colleagues cracked under the tension and quit, but no one got hired to replace them. But despite all of my hard work, I didn't receive any pandemic-related bonus, which was weird since some of my coworkers let it slip that they got a €1,000 bonus for achievements during the pandemic. The compliance. So given all the events of 2020, in January 2021, I've decided that enough was enough. When it was time for my annual review, I've decided that I would negotiate better conditions for myself because as much as I love my job and the people I work for, I couldn't keep working so much for such little pay. As Susan was still on medical leave, Karen was the one who did my annual review, despite the fact that I've only met her a few times and we've never directly worked together. In preparation for the meeting, I've made a list of the things I've been putting up with and a list of reasons why I should get a slight pay bump. I was asking for a 15% pay increase, but was happy to accept a 10%. It wasn't about the money. It was about knowing that there would be at least a chance that management valued me as an employee and that I was not just some sucker who did so much for not even a thank you. After making my case to Karen and carefully explaining to her what my job was and what I was actually doing, I asked her the dreaded question. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "OP, I appreciate everything you've been doing for the company, and we value you as an employee, but your responsibilities and your abilities are not worth that much." I was speechless. I admit, I was so angry and hurt that I felt tears coming up in my eyes. But I took a deep breath, calmed myself and said, "Thank you for your input, Karen, but I cannot keep working in these conditions. It's not worth it." Karen rolled her eyes and replied, "Then you can quit, but I'll be sorry to see you go." And quit I did. You see, there were two things Karen didn't know. First, as explained, I was a highly valued employee with a great reputation and over 10 years of experience in the field. In our field, reputation is important, and for the last 2 years, I've been receiving job offers from competitors. I always refused because I loved working for Happy Place. But since the events of 2020, I started taking interviews, checking what else was out there. And just before my meeting with Karen, I did an interview with Cool Company, who offered me a 60% raise to do the same job as I did for Happy Place. Second, remember how I said I took almost no vacation days in 2020? So by January of 2021, I had over 2 months of paid leave available. I checked with HR, not Karen, the week before my annual review, and they confirmed to me in writing that I was free to take my vacation days whenever I wanted. So I did exactly what Karen told me to do. I quit. I put in my 2 months notice and took my 2 months vacation, which meant that I came to work for only 1 day to clean out my office and say goodbye before leaving for good. I felt bad because I left so many of my colleagues in a really bad position since now they had to do my job. But they all assured me that they understood and that they would have done the same thing. After my 2 months paid vacation, I started working at Cool Company and I've been here ever since. The aftermath. I kept in touch with a few friends from Happy Place and they regularly informed me of what was going on over there. It seems that me quitting was the push that many of my coworkers needed to also make the final leap and quit. As I said, the conditions went from great to bad since Karen took office. Also, the fact that I quit so abruptly got the attention of the CEO, as we had a good relationship. He asked Maggie, who was aware of the whole story about Karen, about it, and she told him the truth. About me not getting the COVID bonus, about Karen speaking down to staff members, about her telling me to quit if I wanted to. The CEO finally opened his eyes and launched an investigation into Karen's actions. He personally did interviews with some staff members and heard stories about her from people from many different departments. He also investigated the COVID bonus story, and it turns out she only gave the COVID bonus to her friends from different departments, and a very generous one to herself. Plus, since I've quit, no one was actually able to do my job. And the fact that Karen was responsible for me leaving made her responsible for the consequences. So, after reviewing everything, the CEO decided to terminate Karen's contract. Rumor has it the whole staff of Happy Place celebrated this joyous occasion. The cherry on top, last week, my boss at Cool Company walked into my office and said, "OP, you know Jen from HR's retiring soon, right? We did interviews to replace her, and one of the candidates is Karen. She seems competent but asks for quite a lot of money. You and her work together, right? What's she like? Do you think she deserves to be paid more than we initially offered?" I said, "Boss, you have a few minutes? Great. Let me tell you a story." After hearing my very honest opinion of Karen, Boss Man laughed and said, "Okay, good to know. I think we'll tell her that she's not the right fit for us. Thanks, OP." As soon as Boss Man left my office, I sent an email to my friend Lori from HR, who was in charge of replying to candidates. I also told her the story and asked her to keep me informed if there was any development with the whole Karen applies to Cool Company thing. A few hours later, I got an email from Lori. Turns out she copied me to her official reply to Karen. It read, "Dear Karen, thank you for your interest in working for Cool Company. After careful consideration, we regret to inform you that in our opinion, your responsibilities and your abilities are not worth that much." I brought Lori a big chocolate cookie the next day. I just don't think there's anything sweeter than turning around, getting yourself in a good position where you have the upper hand over a person that kind of downplayed you or the work or the effort you were putting in. It's like a really satisfying version of the saying, "the student has become the master." And our final story of the day is by Still Ashamed 35 years later, justify the purchase of a mouse. Started in 1995 with a company doing a job that required me to use Photoshop. Company laptop, IBM ThinkPad, came with a built-in touchpad with the little red button sticking up on the keypad and no mouse. When I requested one, I was told by the CFO that I needed to write up a justification for the expense. 25-year-old company with 350 employees had an $8 million year, and I had to justify a $15 purchase. So I justified it, wasted an hour writing a one-page justification explaining how I could get more work done. They paid me $22 to explain why they needed to spend $15. I mean, that's the way to do it. If you're gonna have to write some bogus explanation, take up that hour and be able to just smile knowing that you charged them extra for that explanation. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.